All right, Anita, come on in.
Oh, 45 minutes. I'll put 25. Hold on. Let me get myself together. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Anita, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. And I see there's a couple of people, Texans in the room. I'm from Houston, Texas. My sobriety date is March the 13th of 1998. And for that, I'm truly, truly grateful. As I listened to Eric and the whole getting in the meeting today, we were tagging, and the universe, God, is such an incredible thing. And let me say this, I always think y'all need me, right? Because I'm just, I'm alcoholic, you know what I'm saying? And so when his person canceled, I'm like, oh, see, God, they know they needed me, right? But at any rate, when I got here, they told me to tell you people what it was like, what happened, and what it's like today. And I made a few notes when Eric was opening up. And one of the things that he said was a qualified speaker. Well, what makes me qualified is I'm alcoholic. I drank a whole lot of alcohol. I did a whole lot of deplorable things, and I did not think I had a problem. And I say that because I had the opportunity to go to the penitentiary twice, right? And that didn't stop me. What that did, when that judge, this was my second time, and the judge said to me, "Hey, you can either go see them people, or you can stay here with us." I'm an alcoholic. My alcoholic brain goes, "Oh, I got a choice." So all of a sudden, it became my idea that I was gonna come see y'all. So I had the opportunity in 1998 to enter the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And even then, I sat there and I listened to people telling these stories and all these things. And again, I said to myself, brain, me, they need me. They need my help because I got solutions. I have a whole bunch of solutions to problems, right? All of my solutions always ended me up drunk, always ended with me waking up some random place, not knowing what had happened before, having to listen and recount the stories of someone telling me what I had done. I was talking to someone not long ago, and they were going, "Hey, now I'm 27 years sober," and they go, "Hey, you remember that time you hit that man over the head with the gun and tied him up in the garage?" I go, "No, not really, but I don't put it past me." Because those are the types of things that I did during my alcoholic career. I came here again, not because I believed there was something wrong with me. I came here because the judge told me to. And the realities are, if people would have done what I told them, stayed where I put them, and followed my directions, my life and theirs would have been fantastic. The big book tells me that. The big book talks about everybody would be happy, right? And everyone, even me, would be happy if people just stayed where I put them. Well, it didn't work out that way. I showed up here. I didn't, and I heard Eric and the other people talking about get a sponsor, do this, that, and the third. Yeah, I knew none of that. I showed up here. I was showing up to get the little piece of paper signed because in my brain, I said, oh, I only have 8 years left on parole, and then I can go live my life like I wanted. Now, mind you, this is me, nuts. 8 years, I was gonna hang out with y'all, and not my life wasn't gonna get different. I was gonna show up, get my paper signed. It didn't work out that way. I stayed here long enough to have some experiences. See, I didn't find the value of a sponsor until I was struggling. See, I read the big book many, many times, and it's a beautiful piece of literature. I actually rewrote it in my brain several times because the grammar is horrendous. However, the things that they told me to do didn't happen. See, I'm not drunk, I'm not alcoholic because I came in here. My primary problem is I'm selfish, I'm self centered. It is all about me. I heard Eric say this is going to be recorded, and I thought to myself, oh, I can go listen to myself over and over and over again. I love talking about me. I am just that self centered and selfish. This program, however, helps me get a little different because they tell you to do some things, right? They tell you get a sponsor, get sponsees, work the steps, do service work, all that kind of stuff. And the beautiful part in that service process is anytime I get to be in service, those are the only moments that I'm not thinking about me. Because any other time of the day, it is always about Anita. I suffer from a disease of selfishness and self-centered. That is the core of my disease. The alcohol was a symptom, but the problem is always me. I've been around here long enough to have some experiences sober. You know what I'm saying? Because when I got here, and I'm sure many of you knew women and men too, we always get either a him or a her or maybe both. I don't know, whatever you like. I don't know what that looks like. I know for me it was one of them hymns, right? And I wanted him to make me feel the way that I believed I was supposed to feel, right? He didn't do that. He didn't do that. And sober. Now, I skipped much of my sobriety because I have to talk about, I'm more into the what it's like today than all the other stuff. Just know I drank a lot. I did a lot of deplorable things. I earned a seat in these rooms. I probably earned a seat in a couple other A's, but I've earned a seat in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, but in some my sobriety, as I stayed sober, as I shared with you, I didn't get a sponsor in the beginning because I was the intellectual, and the book talks about that. I'm that person who came in, and if it didn't make sense intellectually, it just wasn't gonna happen. It just didn't make sense. So I wasn't going to accommodate or appease or acquiesce to any of the things you people talked about because it just didn't make sense to me. Not my brain just couldn't wrap my head around it. However, in these rooms, in this program, some things did happen. And that whole sponsor idea, my very first sponsor, she was like me. We both had a little bit of education, and because I came here with some stuff. I came here with a little piece of paper of higher education from a university, that told me I was smart, right? I came here with some things. And the sponsor I had, she too was a college student. So we got along really well. We got to intellectualize the big book a whole lot. However, she had done some work I had not. We got to that step 4. It talks about step 4 because 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2 are some conclusions. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, new thought, and our lives had become unmanageable. I never got to the new part, that new thought. My lives had become unmanageable. In step 2, it talks about came to believe in this power. Then 3, made these decisions, and then 4, we do this work, right? And so when it came time for me to write this stuff down, and I said to her, I said, well, I don't really have any resentments. I don't really deal with people who I don't like. And her response was, she says, you know what? I don't even need you to go that far back in your history. What I need you to do is go 2 weeks back and tell me everybody you pissed off at. Because I was always in conflict with somebody. The book talks about it. Always in conflict. No matter what it was, I was in conflict with one human being day after day after day. And what that did, I wrote that down, those 2 weeks of people who I'd been disturbed by. Right? The people who in the back of my brain, I was going to go, you know what, when I see them, I'm going to get them. I might step on their toes with high heel pumps. Just craziness, just insanity. But what ended up happening, I went into this room and we went through this process and some things happened. The book talks about it. You go through this and you read all of this stuff from these things that those columns, where had I been at fault? The truth is, I really didn't see where I was at fault because it was always someone else. But in this process, I had the opportunity to take a look at me. It goes on to talk about we learn some truths about ourselves, some facts. We get to digest these chunks, right? I almost choked on some of them because they were so glaring. They were so disturbing, and in this process, but what happened is that moment where the book talks about where you get this level of freedom or emptiness and kind of this floating because you get rid of some stuff, the junk, the debris, And so I carried on, didn't really want to do any more work. In 6 and 7, it talks about that deal of shortcomings and defects. Well, I never really thought, they give you, if newcomers, they used to give us these lists when I first got here. And I went through the list and she said, well, pick every one that you have. Well, I gave her the paperback and I didn't pick nothing because I was like, I ain't got none of this. I mean, I don't have these problems. I don't have these defects. But they kept showing up in other ways. They manifested in all kinds of ridiculously and crazy ways. There was an old timer once that told me about shortcomings and defects. And what they said was the defect is the fact you got a flat tire. The tire is defective. The shortcoming is you keep riding on it. I kept riding on a flat tire. My defects just kept going and going and going and getting worse and worse. And when you're riding a flat tire, it goes blah, blah, bloom, blah, blah, bloom. That was me. I'm walking around the world going blah, blah, bloom. My defects, my shortcomings, they showed up constantly. And the other part of this deal was some of them, those shortcomings and defects didn't show up until they started bothering me. See, the reality is if they bothered you, that's not my problem. That's some personal problems you have. They didn't bother me. Only when I began to be bothered by certain things did I find it necessary to change that. It wasn't, I didn't have this fairy tale kind of go by the book sobriety and getting to this place of freedom. It took me some stuff. I had to do some things because I'm different. I'm special, right? So I did things differently, but I also got some of these consequences because I believe myself to be so different. Here I am today in this life of sobriety and recovery. I do a lot of service work. I do a lot of service work, and it's not just in coming to meetings and sharing, but I do a lot of service work in the where I live, with meetings, with H&I, with all kinds of things. I try to be, and it didn't come in the beginning. It didn't come like that because I'm thinking someone read in here we're people who normally wouldn't mix. I didn't want to be bothered with you people. I didn't want to be bothered with y'all because in my brain, I'm saying, you know what? I wouldn't be fooling with y'all other than coming in here. If I saw you on the street, I'd probably look and be like, oh, I don't know them. That's the truth. That's the reality. We are truly people who normally would not mix, but we got here and we suffer from this disease. We share this common problem, and the common solution lies in the steps. The common solution lies in doing the work that's necessary, getting out of me long enough to listen to some people long enough to understand that I typically am the problem. And that was probably one of the most heartbreaking things I ever had to experience. When I realized I might be the problem, it just broke my heart to think I was the problem, right? It was a terrible day. But the reality is I'm usually the problem. In most of all of my conflicts, and in step 11, it talks about that. Any and every time I'm disturbed, it's usually something about me. It's usually something about Anita. And the solution to that is always I got to take a look and stop and look at me and go, okay, Anita, let's look at where you play this part. What is your role in this chaos and confusion? Because normally I have a role because I got a big mouth. I'm usually saying what I want to say. And sometimes I got to be conscious about, I probably shouldn't say it like that. Let me think about it. I even have to write some things down before I go talk to people sometimes. But that's what you people taught me to do, because in the book it talks about every now and then I might want to pause. I might want to pause before I open my mouth because I don't ever want to bring harm to another person, not intentionally. I can't help if your feelings get hurt or people's get hurt, not because I intended for that to happen. But even then, I still have to go back and say, hey, you know what? I apologize if your feelings got hurt. Whatever that looks like. And you people taught me how to do that, because this is not an easy journey. This is not an easy journey. And being sober with a couple of years, a couple 24s, I still do some stupid things. I still make some poor decisions because I had another him later in this process. And this another him who wouldn't do right. I expected him to understand my disease, but he had no clue of what my disease was. And so when he wasn't doing right, all kind of craziness happened. Y'all know the part of the book we're talking about all kind of craziness can happen with us. And what ended up happening for me, I wanted to burn his house down. And I didn't necessarily want to burn the whole house. I wanted to just burn this little patch of the front of the house. And so I can recall, and even before the house burning the house, I remember standing in Home Depot. I don't know if y'all have a Home Depot or Lowe's, or it was a hardware store. They sell concrete. I remember standing in the store at the concrete department, and I'm standing there just looking. And so the man that worked there came and said, "Hi, ma'am, can I help you with something?" And of course, my brain goes, well, if I really tell him what I need the concrete for, he might think I'm nuts, and he might even call the police, and then I get in trouble. So what I told him was, no, 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 I'm good. Well, the reason I wanted the concrete, I was going to pour it down his toilets, right? I was going to pour concrete down the toilets, but again, didn't do that. So my next thought was, I'm just going to burn his house down. I'm going to burn a piece of the grass. And I'm sitting outside of his house, and I'm figuring out how I can get over the 10-foot wrought iron fence, past the cameras, and beyond the dog. Now, this is actual. This isn't nothing I'm thinking about. This is something I actually went to do, and I'm sitting there, and I'm trying to figure out how I can do this. Because what was supposed to happen was I was gonna go burn the little piece of grass. He was gonna come home from his wherever he was and see the piece of grass burn, and he was gonna go, "Oh my God, she I really need to call her. There, I miss her so much." This one was supposed to happen in my brain. He was supposed to call me, and everything was supposed to be all right because he knew he was wrong. Nuts. What ended up happening, I sat there contemplating this whole process and this whole scenario in my head. And suddenly, because I have this God relationship, I have a relationship with God, believe it or not. And in the back of my head, it goes, they take people to jail for that. That's a God consciousness. It wasn't no stop. It was, they take people to jail for that. I go, oh, yeah, they do. And I drove off. Oddly enough, it is the power of a relationship with a God, a power greater than me, that I've come to understand. Because, see, when I first got here, God looked just like me. The book talks about that irritable, restlessness, and discontented person. See, I came in here believing I was this perfectionist. I wasn't perfect at nothing. I know he told me to curb my cousin, but I had to say it this way. I wasn't perfect at shit. I didn't complete nothing. I didn't finish nothing. And if I didn't finish, it was always somebody else's fault. I didn't finish because whatever the reason was. But I came here believing I was a perfectionist. That irritable, restless, and discontented person, that God looked like me until life started happening. Some things happened. I got the job back. I got a little bonus money. Them kids, I had a kid when I got here, and right now she's nuts. She's kind of goofy and nutty as a squirrel right now, but she's going through what she's going through, right? But I came here and I thought, and that God deal, after a while, God started becoming this surrealistic thing. It was a unicorn. It pissed rainbows and shot out gold dust. That's what it looked like. Then life kept going and kept going. And eventually God became that thing that is absolute. That I have a relationship. You people told me, get in your own personal relationship with God. I don't really know the dust thous them, all that holiness, whatever. What I do know is when I'm struggling, I be like, say, man, I need to talk to you about this mess going on right now in my life. That's how I talk to my God, my friend, my personal relationship. There are times when I have to share with God, say, man, I don't even want to do this. Why do you have me in this position? This is not what we talked about some months ago when we was developing this relationship, Jesus. But here I am. And the person, the God that I serve says, yeah, I know. I changed my mind. I got another mission and assignment for you. That's the beauty of this relationship. See, I don't never know what's next or what's coming. All I get to do is do what's right before me. I have the opportunity today. I have this lady that was the nemesis. She was my nemesis, really, growing up. She was my mother. She's my mother. And we didn't particularly care for one another. But today, my mother is 95 years old. She's my 95-year-old toddler. And what I get to do is I get to actually be the caregiver to her. I get to hear her share with me her experiences, her pains, her joys. The beauty of a new relationship that I get to have today, because about 8 years ago, when she asked me to move back into her house, um, my head goes, I have four older sisters, and my head goes, why can't you call one of them other employees you gave birth to come stay with you? Why are you calling me? You got other employees. You could call them. Well, it wasn't the assignment. So I showed up here very begrudgingly, but it's been one of the best experiences I've ever had. I get to actually think about another human being, a loving human being that I didn't always care for. I get to, in the St. Francis prayer, it talks about we have to understand instead of trying to be understood. See, today I get to understand the whys of how my mother was and why she did the things she did. She was born a year after the Great Depression. She was born in 1930. Her mindset, her value system is different. Because the other part of that is she never thought on her list of what her daughter would be when they grew up, alcoholic wasn't one of them. It wasn't on the list of job descriptions that I was supposed to pick. It wasn't a major I could have, well, it was a major in college, but it wasn't one that was listed, you know. But the deal is, I get to care for this lady. I get to care for her in such a way that these things that I never thought I'd experience, that empathy, that compassion, this different kind of love I get to show her, not because it's an obligation, because parent daughter, there's certain but it's because it's a thing, it's a God thing, because God made some decision some time ago to say, hey, at some point in this journey you're gonna have to go back, and this is how you're gonna reconcile that relationship that was tragically destroyed and damaged during your career of alcoholism, even part of your sobriety. Because there was a point when I was sober, I didn't talk to her unless she called. I get to rectify that in just my action. I don't have to go say, mommy, this. I get to show it just in my actions by holding her hand. Those kinds of things are incredible. Things I never thought I'd get to do. My life is, the book talks about it. We get to have this life we never imagined. You know, does it mean I still make I don't make any bad decisions? Yeah, I do. I've been thinking about, I got this, I got to whisper this, but I got an older sister that lives in the house, right? She's a practicing addict. And sometimes she's laying on the couch, and me, sober Anita, I think about getting a sock of nickels and just beating her. You know what I'm saying? But I'm sober. And I don't do it, but I think about it. I just look at her and I'm like, I'm just going to beat her with a sock of nickels. And I was telling my mother about it. My mother goes, did you get past the violence? I said, yeah, but I still think about it. I just want to beat her with a sock of nickels. I didn't. I didn't. It doesn't mean that these thoughts don't come. The thoughts that I know that don't come is taking a drink. That's no longer a solution in my life. Drinking, y'all say it, I am recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I'm not hopeless anymore. I got a whole lot of hope. I thrive on this idea of what's next, of what's to come. And this program, this work has done that for me. See, I get this whole level of step 11 is one of my favorites. See, that's the place where my spiritual enlargement happens. I get this expansion with all these new experiences with these people I encounter. I have sponsees today, which is another whole nother story. Because sponsoring was not my most favorite activity in this program, because they call with all the dramas and the nonsense. And I'm like, say, man, I am not your God. You're going to have to find your own power by which to live. What I can tell you, especially when they call me about relationships, I usually have to tell them, say, hey, I might not be the best person to talk to because I wanted to burn his house down. What I can tell you to do is a thorough sex conduct inventory, because that's what I had to do. And when I did that, I got better. I got a whole lot better. I mean, now am I in a relationship? No, because I'm not spiritually fit today. Not right now. Maybe one day. Who knows? But not right now. Because I look at him and I be like, ooh, that's going to be a lot of work. And if you be alcoholic like I be alcoholic, we do enough work just to stay sober and deal with these people in the world every day. That's a whole lot of work. Because see, I'm that person who wakes up in the morning and my committee is still alive and well. And they wake up sometimes, or I wake up and they be going, "Oh, child, we so glad you woke up. We've been waiting to talk to you." Every day I make a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of this God, to the care of this power, this thing that is absolute in my life. Knowing when I'm gonna act crazy, because I still can say, okay, hey, God, I'm gonna be right back. I gotta go over here and go to my default and act the fool for a minute, but I'm coming back. Trust, I'm not lost no more. But I need to take a moment to go do this, and I get to come back. It's not as frequent as it used to be. It's not as frequent, but I have those choices still today. But I have to remember, what do I want? Do I want the consequences, or do I want to practice the solution that you people told me exists? That I pray, that I ask for some understanding, that I ask for all these things that it talks about, patience and tolerance. Yeah. It comes and goes. Sometimes I'm patient. I thought one time I needed some medication for patience. I thought maybe if I got some medication, but the doctor said there wasn't such a thing. But what's happened in my life about maybe 7 months ago, maybe 8 months ago, I was in the hospital. I had sepsis and was about to die, and all of those things happened, and I'm in this hospital room, and the doctor came in, and what the issue is, they did this emergency procedure where they stuck this tube in my kidney because my kidney was so infected, and was misshaping. I had what are called staghorn kidney stones. They're not the kind that you can just poop and pass, right? They're the kind that literally um, they become part of your kidney tissue. Anyway, this doctor came in the room and he said to me, Miss Lewis, you wouldn't have made it another day. You wouldn't have made it. And I'm thinking, wow, I never heard that before. But the next thing he said was, we're going to have to remove your right kidney. And I said, really? Do I have choices? He says, yes, you have a choice. You either die or we take the kidney. Now, this is a doctor. You would think he had a little bit of bedside manner, but what it did is, it's the same concept in this program. You drink, you die. There are certain things I must do regardless of what it is. And when I apply the steps, the book talks about it. When we apply these principles in all our affairs, step 12, right? We do this stuff. We carry the message to the person who still suffers. And we practice this stuff in every affair in my life. I had to practice this program in a hospital bed. I had to concede to myself, inner self, that if I did not do some things, I would die. Like the book talks about, I had to concede to my innermost self that I was alcoholic. That was the only way I was going to begin to recover. I could always say, yeah, I drank a little too much, or, yeah, I got into fights, or every time I get drunk, I end up in jail somewhere. I could say all of those things and never acknowledge I had a problem. But only until I conceded to me did the problem begin to evolve to find some solution. And it's the same in my living. I practice these principles in all my affairs, at work, with people, with y'all, because y'all are some hard people. In Houston, I don't know about where y'all come from, but these drunks in Houston, who child? Sometimes I got to pray before I walk in the meeting, because there's gonna always be one. It's usually some old timer who's some bleeding deacon, who always got a response to something that had nothing to do with him or her. At any rate, in this process of my medical crisis, I had to dig in and go back to some basics in this program. I had to trust in this God that became absolute in my life. And remember that God is absolute. The book talks about our greatest asset is our experience. What I know today is the God of my understanding has always carried me through everything, even though I didn't think it would. All of the things that have happened, all of those poor decisions, all of the fears that I had about just staying sober. I stayed sober because I trusted this God, this power that you people said I had to find. Because the book tells me that we're taught, we learn, and we demonstrate. And today I get to demonstrate what this program looks like, what sobriety looks like, what practicing the principles look like. You know, I mentioned I have this daughter, um, and she's 30, she's 37, and she's nuts, right? And I say that jokingly, but she's suffering from her own issues, mental. I don't know if she's doing drugs or drinking. I don't really know. What I do know is I can't fix her. As a parent, there was a time I was up all night. You know, I left Houston one time and flew to Tennessee because that's where she was, and packed her up and drove her back to Houston. And a week later, she back in Tennessee, and I'm trying to fix her, you know, because I'm that person who I'm gonna go get my big earth moving machine, and I'm gonna go pick your whole life up and bring it into my world and let you sit there while I go out and fix your life. You know, I'm gonna be responsible for the repair of your life. I don't do that anymore. You people have taught me how to do that, how to let go and trust that God is going to do what God is going to do for my sanity and for theirs. Because every time I interfere, every time I get in the way, the book tells me I put myself in a position to be hurt. Because I'm always trying to make her be different or think that she has this potential to be something that she should be. Because sometimes my brain goes, you spend a whole lot of money on her education. You know, sent the child, she got a whole master's degree. But that's not what it's about. You people taught me that I had to let her go because God is her creator. God is the thing that is going to save her and not save her. I don't know. I know that I can't. And there's a certain freedom. And I know mothers might be saying, "Ooh, how can you do that?" I had to. I had to because I cannot live in a space of stress and distress and toxicity just because I think and it's that whole deal. I had to take my cape off. I can't be God. I tried and it didn't work. It caused more damage than it was good. So I had to remove myself from trying to fix these people. Is it a painful experience? Sure, it is. But it's one that was necessary. You know, this program and this fellowship, because in the midst of all of that, there were people here that I could talk to that had had these same kinds of experiences, you know, and I could share these things and they didn't judge. They didn't say, oh, well, you know, they just loved me regardless. They loved me regardless. They helped me through those pains, that anger, that guilt, that embarrassment. You know, how dare my daughter be this way? Those things that we go through that we might not want to admit. Yeah, it's embarrassing. It used to be. It's not anymore because it's the realities. But God is a absolute thing. And I believe that in this universe, God's universe, all things work out exactly the way they're supposed to. You know, and this program taught me that. You know, these multiple years of sobriety are fantastic. I've been able to do that consecutively and stay sober for however many days it is. But what I still get to do is experience some of those emotions that I experienced years ago, but I don't drink behind them. You know, do I still suffer from some insecurities? Yeah, I do. Do I still suffer from some guilt and pain and anger? Sure, I do. But I get to do that and have some resolve because this program told me there's some other things you can do. If you stick close to God, He's gonna work some things out. There's a piece in that book because I'm a believer in those transactional. It's funny when you were doing the whole big book thumper thing. I'm so crazy. My head goes, well, what do I win? And then when you said you were gonna mail me something, I said, oh, what's let me give you my address because I'm thinking I'm finna get something. And I say that to say relationships are transactional, even mine with God. I may not get nothing tangible, but God, if I do certain things, the book talks about it under these conditions. If I do some stuff, I'm gonna get some stuff. I'm gonna get a level of peace. I'm gonna get some understanding. I'm not gonna be in conflict with everybody that comes into my life. I'm not going to struggle in these areas where I've struggled. I'm going to have this peace that is just beyond understanding. I can be the queen of, okay, people come to me, okay, let me know how that work out for you. I no longer have to be in this place of contention where I have to be right. Usually I am, but I don't have to tell you I'm always right because I know I'm always right. I'm better at that. But usually I am right. But I don't have to make you not be right because I know I am. It's really a crazy dynamic in my brain. But this program has taught me how to do some things very differently, to be more loving, to be more tolerant, to be patient. See, they wouldn't give me no appeal for it. So I had to find a way through the relationship with God to find a level of patience, to contend with people. That's my biggest struggle. People, it's there every fucking where. No matter where I go, there they are. My house is full of them. There's always somebody running around here, whether it's my daughter, a sister, grandchild, everybody. There's just always somebody. I can't escape them. So I had to find a way to deal with them. I had to find a way to live amongst them without walking in a space with my face looking like, the stank face. Every time you see people, I had to find a way to exude a level of joy, a level of patience and tolerance. That I love you regardless of any and everything else because God has loved me the way he has. That I get this grace, this thing grace, because I've always had it. It's like a window, right? It's like you're in this circle of life, and every now and then you pass this window, and God will say, "Hey, you ready?" And most of the time, prior to sobriety, I'd say, "Nah, I'm not ready yet." I'd come back around, and every now and then that moment comes where he says, "You ready?" I get to slide through that window and get to experience what I experienced today. The program of Alcoholics Anonymous has saved me, not just my life, but my soul, my spirit, my being. It has altered my thoughts. The book talks about it. We get to have a new outlook upon life, God, and our fellows. I look at people and things differently. I even look at God differently. When I got here, I thought God just worked at the church, right? That if I went to church, he was going to do a little work for that hour and a half, and then I have to leave, and God's no longer with me. See, this program has taught me that God is absolute, that no matter what, I can reach out to people who are also part of that God relationship. See, God lives in this program, right? That's the ultimate authority. That's the ultimate authority. And through you people, I get some God relationships because you have them. So I get them. Not that it's like this thing that I get from touching you, but I get to watch you demonstrate it. I get to watch these people having overcome certain things in this process. And therefore, I believe it's that hope that I can too. If you're new, I'm almost out of time. I got a minute left. If you're new, keep coming back. Just don't drink. Life is going to be life. Because it was life when you were drinking, it's still going to be life when you're not. Just don't drink and you have a chance. That's what they used to tell me. Well, they used to tell me a whole lot of stuff. They used to tell me stop talking. If you don't open your mouth, won't nothing come out. They used to tell me all kind of stuff. And I'm gonna leave the newcomer with this little story. So I don't know how sober I was. I was probably about maybe 18 months. And the group that I was in, the whole meeting, it was a club. They were moving from one building to the other. And I was such a busybody, and I was always in conflict with somebody. And so the guy, one of the old timers, he let me be in charge of the bathroom. I was in charge of the ladies' room, right? So I went and put all these knickknacks in the ladies' room, and every time I went in there, somebody kept moving my shit. They kept moving the stuff in the restroom. So I went to the old timer. I said, "Hey, we need to call group conscious because people keep moving the stuff in the ladies' room, and I am having a problem." And he says, "Anita, that's an Anita problem. That is not a group problem. You are going to have to figure out a way to get past yourself and know you were just in charge of the bathroom. It is not yours. it was revolutionary for me that he said it wasn't mine because I'm thinking it's mine. You people gave me because they tried to give me a little power so I'd go away. You know how you do the newcomers. You go find something for them to do so they can stay out the way. And that's what he did. He made me go do something, but then when I said, "Hey, we need to have group conscious," I am having a problem. I get to still do that. I have a sponsor. I call him all the time, and I say, "Hey, man, uh, I'm having a problem with these people." And sometimes what he does, because he knows me so well, he'll just, the Jedi mind trick. He'll switch the subject. You know how the Jedi mind trick works. Everybody watch Star Wars. The Jedi mind trick makes you switch your brain real quick, as if you wasn't talking about what you was talking about. You know what I mean? Like when in Star Wars, when he says, "No, you don't want a cigarette." He switched his brain. But anyway, it's a long story. But anyway, I'm really grateful that you guys, Eric, that you asked me to come and participate in your meeting. And I do believe that it was the universe because originally there was someone else, and maybe I definitely needed this more than y'all needed me, because what I know today is any and every time I show up, I get something. That's that transactional relationship. I get to walk away and go finish dinner and go deal with my toddler and listen to some of my grandson rattle on about one thing or another and know that I'm still in peace. I'm happy that I've been of service tonight. So thank you very much, guys, for letting me share.